Hi there, and thanks for stopping by ONlit. My name is Erika Chesnick, and I'm an educator from the Limestone District School Board in Kingston, Ontario. In this module, we will dig into all things morphology, including adding to your background knowledge the basic terms and concepts to be able to more confidently teach morphology in the classroom. We will dig into the history of words in the English language, learn how morphology is represented in the new Ontario 2023 language curriculum, and hopefully walk away with a deeper understanding of why morphology matters for our students and how it impacts many other areas of the language curriculum. When, as educators, we don't understand the phonics rules or morphology behind words and why they're built the way they are, it can feel really overwhelming and confusing. I know personally, before I did my learning, I would often just tell students that English was really tricky and that we just had to remember these rules or these spellings. Well, now I know better. And the reason I do have a better understanding is in huge part because of digging into morphology. This module will just scratch the surface, but will hopefully engage your thinking and learning around morphology and why thinking about English this way just makes sense. And it's actually pretty interesting. Before we are better able to understand morphology, we need to learn a little bit of background knowledge. English is a morphophonemic language, which means that when reading, writing, and speaking in English, we use both phonemes or sounds, as well as morphemes to make sense of the written code. Morphemes are the smallest meaningful unit of language. We use morphemes to build words from very simple to incredibly complex. Understanding morphemes is a crucial part of understanding the English code. For example, the word read contains one morpheme, R-E-A-D. However, if we layer on the prefix R-E or re, the word now contains two morphemes, R-E and R-E-A-D, to make reread. The morpheme re has meaning. In this case, it means again. Therefore, the word changes to mean read again. Finally, if we layer on another morpheme, in this case, the suffix ing, the word changes again to mean the present participle of the verb. The word rereading now has three morphemes, the prefix re, the base element read, and the suffix ing. So now that we understand morphemes and the important role they play in the English language, we can better understand what morphology is. Morphology is the study of how morphemes combine and work together to create words. As previously mentioned, as we add or take off different morphemes in words, the meaning, spelling, and even pronunciation can change. As Dr. Louisa Moats notes in her seminal book, Speech to Print, knowing morphemes enhances reading comprehension, word recognition, vocabulary, and spelling. In short, morphology matters. Just as it is important for students to have phonological and phonemic awareness, so too is it important for them to have morphological awareness. The understanding and awareness that the English language is built with morphemes, which include bases, sometimes called roots, prefixes, and suffixes. Every written word contains at least one base element. Those base elements can be divided into two categories, free bases and bound bases. Free bases can stand on their own. Let's use the morpheme read, R-E-A-D, from the previous slide as an example. The morpheme read is a word in the English language that we can and do use by itself in our reading, writing, and speaking. We can also add different affixes to it to expand and change its meaning. A bound base, on the other hand, is a base element that cannot stand on its own. It must be paired with another element in order to form a proper English word. A couple of things to note to help your students' understanding. Oftentimes, people and even reputable publications will call base elements base words. However, as we'll see from the next example, when the base element is a bound base, it actually isn't a word. It's a small but important distinction that can help keep things clear for your students. Not all bases are words. but all bases are elements of the English language and part of English morphology. Here are a couple of examples. The word cupcake is made up of two free base elements, the morphemes cup and cake. In example 2, we have the word structure, which is made up of two bound elements. The bound base struct, or struct, and the bound suffix ure, ure. It is important to note that all affixes, so all prefixes and suffixes in English, are bound elements. The English language is a proverbial Tetris board of unlimited combinations of ways we can put morphemes together to build words. And because our language is constantly evolving, new bases are created every year. When I was a student in elementary school, the base element Google didn't exist. And now Google and the verb Googling are common words in our everyday language. Oftentimes, in webinars, articles, or books, people will refer to base elements as roots. Both terms, roots and bases, are often used universally and interchangeably. But it is important to note that in the new Ontario curriculum, they are called bases. To help explain why this distinction is important, we point to Sue Hegland's 2021 book, Beneath the Surface of Words, What English Spelling Reveals and Why It Matters. Hegland uses the term base element when it comes to the morphology and structure of a written word. It is the phrase she uses when it comes to teaching and describing a written morpheme. Roots, on the other hand, are used to describe the etymological or historical ancestor of a word. So, for example, a Latin or a Greek root. Using this logic and terminology, the word sign, like a stop sign, can be described as a free base morpheme, sign, that comes from the Latin root signum, which means an identifying mark, token, or symbol. Again, as you dig more into morphology, you will hear the terms root and base often being used interchangeably. So it is important to be explicit with students about this language, especially in the junior and intermediate grades. As students move through the grades, the curriculum surrounding morphology and how students are to use their morphological understanding becomes more complex. And we'll dig into that change in the curriculum in one of the next lessons. In conclusion, the English language is made up of morphemes that work together and build on each other to create words, ranging from simple to complex. Knowing these morphemes and the different parts of words is incredibly beneficial for students and can have impacts on reading comprehension, fluency, vocabulary, and even grammar. Morphemes consist of base elements, either free bases that can stand on their own, like read, or bound bases that need at least one other morpheme to make it an English word, like in our example, struct, or struct. We also have affixes, which is an umbrella term for prefixes and suffixes. And finally, it is important to remember that base elements and roots are not exactly the same thing. A base element is a written unit or morphology. Root refers to the etymological or historical ancestor of a word. These two terms are often used interchangeably, but for clarity of understanding, it is important for you, and perhaps your students, to keep the language straight in your mind and in conversations.